Hey guys, Ramsey here. Welcome to another live stream. And it is my absolute honor and pleasure to introduce Mark Sage for the first time on the channel. Mark, thanks for being here, brother.
Hey everyone, thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. So it's actually you guys in the comments. I told everyone to keep the comments coming. I'm going to actually star them as they come along. If you have questions for Mark, just drop them in the chat and I'll star them and we'll kind of come back to them once we get a chance. Everyone, Alan says we're all in our places with bright smiling faces. Ready to see Mark. So that's good stuff. So again, thanks for being here. It's an honor to have you. And so I guess the first question is, since I'm kind of new to your work, tell us a little bit about how you got to the point where you kind of loved fragrances so much that you decided to start your own brand.
Well, I have a really weird backstory. Basically, it started out with me hurting my face and looking at the ingredients on a scar cream, Googling them, finding a website with reviews from soap makers and aromatherapists, and I just got really, really curious about things that I'd never smelled before, particularly vetiver from people's descriptions. I was like, I think I'm going to like that. So yeah, I just started buying raw materials, and with really no background in wearing fine fragrance at all, ever. I think I wore some free samples in college of Drakkar Noir and Brut. I think we got in the intro package, the welcome package, right? And I always just felt, this is just me personally, but I felt like really self-conscious about wearing commercial fragrance because it's not something that was my experience. I felt like I was, like wearing some big logo, I guess, that was, just not me. And so I never got into it. I had a deodorant in college that I loved, which was kind of my signature scent. And one of the things that eventually led me to big interest in perfumery was the fact that about a year after college, I went to the drugstore to get more of it, and it was discontinued. And it was just like, losing my part of my, how I saw myself and how other people smelled me. And other deodorants just sucked on me. And so it's just kind of started this long, slow process of trying to find a way to smell, as good again. And it didn't, I never really succeeded until, I just suddenly realized, wow, there's this thing called perfumery when I, started buying essential oils and wondering like, what, how am I going to justify this?
I don't think I've ever heard someone start their fragrance journey quite that way, reading the cream ingredients and wanting to smell.
Yeah, it was, I think it was actually Muhuhu oil that I'd never heard of. I'd been using essential oils for health stuff for a long time, and I just, what the hell is that?
I've seen that oil in some of like Arise Ladore, Russian Adams work, and I think some of Ensar Oud has some Muhuhu oil in it. So what are some of so once you went on this kind of sniffing experience, kind of buying the ingredients themselves, did you come across some where you were like, oh, I absolutely love those, or did you have some favorites?
Oh yeah, well, vetiver for sure. Once I got it, I wasn't disappointed. People were describing it as smelling like a, kind of like hay, kind of like a campfire, kind of earthy. I loved it right away. But also actually neroli oil. I got a very high quality neroli. This was 13 years ago when it wasn't insanely expensive, but
it is expensive, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like it's gotten to be like retail is like $200 for an ounce. And I was just blown away by how it's just so pretty and diffusive, and it just has this like tart powderiness to it that's wonderful. What were some other ones? Vanilla, absolute. Is just everyone loves vanilla. Yeah, and I'm trying to think if anything else really stood out at the time. I just I was interested in everything, and I'd originally thought I was going to make like scent lotions or something, or moisturizer. I got those ones for personal use, and maybe make some gifts for Christmas. And then I started to realize there was this thing called perfumery, and that also that there was a huge market for fragrance globally. And I have a background in chemistry. I create formulas for creating art at work.
Okay, yeah.
And so I started to think, well, maybe I'd be good at that. And, I find it interesting. And just the thought of like being able to create things that become part of people's daily lives and part of their memories, especially, was just really, I thought like, wow,
That
that's
is cool.
so much more immediate for people than, photography, which, as an art photographer, and you show people photographs and they flip through them because people are used to seeing images and they don't really spend a lot of time on them, and they're like,
Yeah.
oh, yeah, nice. And it just, I was going to openings in New York and watching everyone just like congregate in the middle of the room. A lot of them wearing really very noticeable fine fragrances, and fancy clothes and things, but the art was kind of like secondary. And so it just really struck me like, wow, that's something that, people are really into, that really, connects with people in a very kind of primal way, and, plays on memory and things. And
do you think that you could have transitioned into this passion like you have now without the background in chemistry? Because there's a lot of people that I think get into this as like a hobby and then they become kind of self-trained perfumers. How important is that chemistry background?
It's funny. At first I was like, oh, I was wrong. It's not relevant at all. It's, it's basically more like cooking. There's chemistry involved in cooking, but you don't need to know chemistry to be a good cook at all. Yeah. And I've come to realize, partly from mentoring someone who doesn't have that background, that the advantage is really like in understanding chemical structures and groups of chemicals like aldehydes, and how they relate to each other, but also just in terms of being able to remember chemical names, and retain information about aroma chemicals is really useful. But in general, chemistry, perfumery doesn't involve well, unless you're working for IFF developing new materials, it doesn't really involve actual, reactions. There's some reactions that go on when you mix a fragrance, but they're so complex that you just can't really predict them unless you're, interested in how a material is going to perform in a specific application, like bleach or something, which is not.
So you don't have you have the chemistry background, but you don't actually have the perfume training at like a school, like in France or anything like that, right? Basically.
No, I've never had any mentoring or I've never taken a workshop or anything.
How did you go about kind of starting that project? Did you just start creating stuff and smelling and kind of doing the ready, fire, aim strategy, or what?
I started, smelling materials and then combining them based on, things that I thought would go together, or just, weird ideas that mostly were just terrible. You can imagine, like, I had, this was back in 2010. There was no real information online about how to do it. I was looking for books, and it just seemed like, it was all kind of locked away in these corporations that do their own training of perfumers, and I didn't have access to it. So, I read anything that I could find, for sure, and I just started trying to, get as many materials as I could in small as were available in small quantities, and trying them out and playing around with them. And actually, early on I had some successes, just a lot of failures, which, we're learning experiences, like how not to dose cinnamon oil too high, like things like that. And what materials really aren't, suitable for high levels in fragrance. But actually I made, the first version of Silver was 2010. And the first version of Assam was in 2010. There might have been some other ones that were that year, but I had some okay ideas. Like, neither of the first versions performed well. That's a whole. To make a good finished fragrance, it takes. There's a lot of things that have to come together in terms of, the odor itself, the texture of the odor, the performance over time, how it changes, and how it projects, whether it's safe on skin, of course. it's a lot.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot of moving parts. There's a brand that I stumbled across probably within the last month. I smelled something from them for the very first time. It's La Via del Profumo. I think it's he's a Frenchman based in Italy, and he goes by the name Abdes Salam Attar, if I'm not mistaken. But he does perfumery courses online, and he said that everyone makes perfume out to be really difficult and challenging to mix. But if you use high quality ingredients and you use good naturals, it's actually not a hard thing to do. It's trying to make the synthetic materials smell good and work together that's hard. What has been your experience with, like, how do you dose the naturals versus the synthetics and all that?
I mean, I think he has a point there, up to a point. If you're trying to do something original, though, it's very hard to do anything original with naturals these days. Just pure naturals, unless you're really going crazy sourcing really high end stuff, which was never my approach. The aroma chemicals were really difficult to challenging to learn because the surprising thing is that natural materials have characters, but aroma chemicals have parts of characters that overlap with different things, and so that some of them can be really difficult to really pin down in terms of what you would do with them or how to actually construct an odor out of them. My learning process was really because I didn't really have access to fragrance formulas to see how other people are doing it. I was using GCMS data from natural materials and just seeing why things smell the way they do in nature. And how they're, I guess, combined in essential oils and absolutes and things. So yeah, the aroma materials or aroma chemicals are at first at least I found them at least extremely challenging.
Do you have would you say Clandestine Laboratories? So you've been at it now for 13 years officially. Is that right?
Yeah, 13 years, 2 months, I guess. I started in January of 2010.
Nice. Do you have like a DNA? Would you consider that Clandestine Laboratories has like a house DNA? Like, is there a similarity from one fragrance to the next that you've kind of created for yourself?
I mean, I think inevitably, because they're, I'm the one evaluating them, and I have really specific tastes. I think everyone does, but my part of my initial idea, which I don't know if you know about, was that I'm a little fragrance sensitive. Like, I don't like strong commercial fragrances. I just shy away from certain types of compositions. And so my thought was that I'm making stuff for myself and people like me, and people who don't want to smell like a commercial fragrance, but also don't want to be overwhelmed by this artificiality that's often a quality in commercial fragrance, and that a lot of people who think they're fragrance sensitive are really responding to this, just the way that the mind perceives odor and the way that affects the body. So yeah, I thought I'll just I'm going to be making things for people who don't like fragrance and can't wear fragrance necessarily. And surprisingly, actually, the last year I've had 3 people buy their first bottle of fragrance from me who aren't usually able to wear fragrance. So that's been successful in that respect. But the surprising thing, of course, is that my actual audience has turned out to be people who are really knowledgeable about fragrance, which is not me at all.
So you don't wear anything except your own. I think you were telling me this backstage. You don't actually wear anything except for your own creations. Is that correct? You don't wear Dior, Chanel, Guerlain?
No, every once in a while I'll wear something. Like I have a very random, very tiny fragrance collection. I have probably my favorite vintage fragrance actually is Coriandre by Jean Patou, which is I think is just great. It's so warm and green, and I've got a vintage bottle that I got from, was part of an eBay lot years ago. Yeah, and I don't think I've never really worn that one because the sprayer is broken. I could just like get a little bit out onto the back of my hand so I can smell it. I have a bottle of Musc Ravageur that a friend bought and didn't, it wasn't what he expected. So he, kind of permanently loaned it to me.
They started in New York. They were when they started in 2000, that was big in the New York scene.
Yeah. And it's, it's a great fragrance. I've worn it once. I wore it actually the day that I was moving in here because I just smelled horrible. It was August. It was like I needed something strong, and it worked really well, actually. I like it. Yeah, I mean, I could probably count the number of commercial fragrances that I've worn on one hand, maybe two.
Wow.
Probably.
Kudos to you for staying away. I don't know if I don't have the willpower to do that. I want to smell everything, and it's interesting because you were telling me you want to smell every material, like every ingredient. So yeah,
that's the bug for me, is the materials. I mean, it's just like, oh, what can I discover that I can use in a way? And when I smell fine fragrances, I'm usually just like, well, fine. I don't know. It's just not my thing.
Are you worried it'll like pervade your thoughts and you won't kind of have your own like ideas? Is that kind of what you're thinking? Or because you said you didn't even start though. You didn't even start out by wearing them and then you switched. You went straight to your own creations. Yeah.
Well, when I first started, I lived on the Upper East Side at the time, and there was a Sephora like blocks away that I'd get off at the subway stop that was right there. Every once in a while I'd stop by and, smell some things and spray some strips. And I just found, actually there's one fragrance I smelled at Sephora that I liked, which was, Certo, which I think, it's a pretty great fragrance.
That was a big hit.
Other than that, I mean, I admire light blue, which was everywhere in 2010 when I first started out. Like it was a smell of the New York City subway system. It's a monster in terms of diffusion, so you can smell it from half a block away. I think it's kind of a beautiful fragrance in its diffusion, and it performs really, it's a marvel of performance. But it's also not my approach, because up close I find it smells really synthetic and harsh, especially at first. And I try to make things that are agreeable from any distance at least.
Yes.
And that kind of draw you towards skin.
So as now that you're saying, about, modern perfumery and not really finding anything that really moves you, how do you feel about kind of IFRA and the role that they play? Are you IFRA compliant?
Yes.
Okay.
To the best of my abilities. In fact, I'm going to be launching some EDT concentrations. Everything so far is EDP, but because especially lime, expressed lime oil is so heavily restricted now, I can't make certain compositions work as EDPs, and I'll just make them more dilute. And that's I think that's an interesting misconception I think that people have about fragrance concentrations, is that the more concentrated something gets, the more high performing materials are going to be in it and so on. But it's actually, in terms of things that are restricted, it's the lower concentrations where you're more free to compose with things like lime expressed or Damascanone or Damascones, or any of the things that are restricted by IFRA.
Did you have any challenges going to a concentration like you're not dealing with, though you're not used to dealing with eau de toilette, let's say? Did you have any challenges crop up that you weren't used to?
Not really, because as it happened, the three fragrances so far are all pretty strong at my normal concentration, and so they actually seem to work a little better, more dilute. Going forward, I may have some, there may be some issues where I'm just not happy with how something performs at that strength.
Well, to your point, because when you add more alcohol to the concentration, it actually makes it project more, not less. Most people think that if you get like a pure parfum, it's going to be a beast, but actually the pure parfums are the ones that kind of sit closest to the skin.
Yeah. I mean, the reason that the perfumes are done in alcohol is actually because alcohol has an incredibly high vapor pressure. And so, when you first spray it on, you get that bloom, and then it continues to evaporate. And so you get, it acts as a kind of a top note booster, and it kind of livens up the base notes at first until it all evaporates. But yeah.
Would have been, so did you have any, when COVID kind of came around, I heard you the other day say you had like a material that you couldn't get for a particular fragrance, that you were maybe struggling to get that material. Did you have like supply chain issues that affected your house or anything like that?
Yeah. I mean, everyone had supply chain issues during that time, I think. My girlfriend, I actually joking for April Fools, I may release a fragrance called Supply Chain Issues, that a hottest fragrance is the one that no one's wearing. That doesn't exist. I mean, I'm always dealing with supply chain issues, though. Actually during COVID, unfortunately, I had, I think 3 suppliers that I used regularly disappeared. White Lotus, Chris, who ran it, retired, and I think partly because of COVID and the challenges of that. Trying to think of the other ones, but it was scary. I was trying to, I was wondering who was next and what I needed to stock up on before they disappeared.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Do you, so kind of as an indie house, I guess you kind of touched on it a little bit, but where do you see, what do you feel that you can maybe bring to the table that maybe some of the perfume from the big boys, like the LVMH creations and Puig and all that stuff, that they just can't compete with you on?
Well, I mean, I think when I first got into it, I thought, all these commercial fragrances, they have this similarity to them that seems to be a flaw in the industry. The more I learned about the industry and how consolidated it had become, and how it just seems like, to be a trained perfumer is such a specific career. And the only people, at the time at least, that I was aware of that were really investing in training people were these big corporations, and they were all kind of doing it the same way. I think also, probably the advent of GCMS encouraged that, because everyone started really directly copying off each other when they had, perfumery is a long history of people copying concepts from each other, because, they're early on, there were a limited number of materials and ideas, and so someone would do something that was popular and successful, and another brand would be like, well, we have to do a cheaper also. And, that's the way it's always worked. But I think, having this specific knowledge and not having to, kind of use imagination and skill to create these, imitations, I think that's really kind of led the development of perfumers in a particular direction, where they've become more technicians, I guess.
Yeah, but even in the old days, before GCMS, so you mentioned Drakkar Noir earlier. There's actually there's a bunch of fragrances that tried to copy Drakkar, and like this is one of them. I think this is like a sub $10 fragrance, Lamani Pour Homme. But interestingly enough, because
I think you pulled that out the other night on Monday.
Yeah, this is sub 10. This is like $7 I paid for this or something, right? It is since it's before GCMS came along, the perfumers back in the day had to kind of just, they didn't know exactly what was in it, so they had to smell and guess. And these older clones, if you will, end up smelling more like a flanker of the fragrance itself than the actual fragrance.
Yeah, it's someone's creative interpretation of it.
Exactly.
Rather than just being like, let's take this part and. Although GCMS has been around since the 60s, I'm pretty sure.
Okay, that's interesting.
But it's become, like everything. Every other technology has come down in price. It's become more accessible, and it's become prevalent.
Yeah. There was a question that one of the audience members wanted me to ask you. They said, do you have an accord that you created that would be your favorite so far? I know that's asking you, like, do you have your favorite, which one of your children is your favorite, but do you kind of have an accord or a perfume that you've created so far that you're most proud of?
Yeah, as an accord, I think actually Novochoc, because it's a beast in terms of performance. It's really diffusive. I don't usually, I'm not a real beast mode guy, but despite being actually pleasant to wear. It's one of the more diffusive fragrances I know of. And I don't know if you've noticed that yet because you're probably trying it on yourself, but I had the experience of giving a sample to someone at where I work who was a guest who was working in the storage space, which was about 10,000 square feet. And she was about 40 feet away from the door, sprayed it on her wrist, one spray, rubbed it, and then went off to work in the back. And I went downstairs, came back again. And when I opened the door to the space, like it was like this fine wall of Novochoc was just filling the whole space. And the other thing that makes me proud about it is that if you showed me the list of materials that if you showed me the formula and I didn't know that it worked, I would think it was kind of ridiculous. It's got some really weird stuff in it to make the chocolate, but it comes together somehow.
I just sprayed some. It is very unique. I don't think I've ever smelled a chocolate that smells quite like cutting directly into like chocolate cake, so thick and heavy, and yet kind of unsweet. There's most of the chocolate fragrances that I really love end up being like chocolate ouds lately. That's been kind of a trend, and this doesn't have the oud. At least I don't think it does. But it has
no. It's the naturals in there are Apopanax and Peru balsam. It's a pretty heavily artificial formula for mine. I'm not, I use a lot of natural materials, but I'm not one of those people who's like, I have to make everything, 60 or 70% natural, or just,
yes,
it's going to suck.
Really good synthetics. I agree.
Yeah. And, synthetics are really freeing. When you're using a natural, you're using, tens or hundreds of chemicals at one time, and not all of them are, performing well, and not all of them are what you want to smell. But also, natural, like I said before, naturals have their own character already. And when you use aroma chemicals, you can create, a character that's, possibly even new.
Yeah, and I think, if you go back to the really early perfumes before, let's say, Jiki came along and kind of changed the game, a lot of the really early fragrances were like Lily of the Valley or Jasmine, or, they were literally meant to smell like the flower. And then Jiki came along and kind of added that just creative artistic process. And then I think the industry kind of never looked back. M3 was asking who you are. So this is Mark Sage. He's the owner and perfumer of a brand called Clandestine Laboratories, which I have a live stream up of where I tested 6 of the 8 fragrances. I did a video on another one yesterday. And I'm wearing Film Noir as my scent of the day. I wore it to work today. It's a beautiful fragrance. But he is joined our stream, and that's his website is clandestinelaboratories.com, which I will. It's actually up in the comment. I think the video says Mark Sage Clandestine Laboratories M3, but that is Mark Sage, and he's the owner of Clandestine Laboratories, and he's joining us for an interview, a chat. So yes, I'm glad you joined, M3. Thank you.
And what's funny about that is I'd originally intended to stay entirely anonymous. I was really hoping I could just kind of hide behind my brand and not be Mark Sage, perfumer. But
that's right. You were telling me about that. How long did that last?
Actually, until Scented Devil's first review, in which he outed me.
Derek outed you? That's funny.
Yeah.
Were you upset?
Which was good, actually. It was it was an idea that I had that wasn't realistic, but also, people want to know, the story behind the person, they want to know the person behind the brand.
Yes.
I think I've actually confused some people into thinking that I'm some, if you look at my website, I think it's got some amateurish touches, but it's fairly slick, and it makes it, if you read the text, it makes it sound like we're some, secret underground organization that's like, got employees and things, but it's just me.
Underground fragrance right here on your business card.
Yep.
Rachel asks, what is Mark's process like? How long does it take to go from idea to bottle? Thank you, Rachel.
That's a good question. My process is bizarre and varies from fragrance to fragrance. And how long it takes really varies. Like some of my fragrances Novochoc actually is, I think, the second version of Novochoc, and it was done. The first version worked, really pretty well, and it just needed a little tweaking. Other ones have taken me. I mean, I've got ones that I've been working on for, since like 2012 or 2013 that are still not finished or released and may never be. A lot of it I find is I'll get fragrances to a point often where I feel like they're solid. There's something going on there that's working. And so I'll mix up a larger batch of it, and then I'll start taking stuff, taking portions off of that and modifying them to try to finish it. And often it's a very strange process. I mean, professional perfumers would probably be horrified by the way I work, but I'm not a professional perfumer. There's a lot of luck involved, and I don't start out with like a brief or notes that I'm going for necessarily. That I have to put in the fragrance. And so I think that kind of gives me an advantage because, as I'm working, I'm smelling things and going, what does this need? What's going to make it perform? What's going to make it more pleasant? What's going to finish it? And often, the last ingredient or two, sometimes it'll be like 20% of the formula or 30% of the formula, but it's like, it's like finding the missing puzzle piece. And then it's just, everything is complete.
I think that's the answer to the previous question. As an indie house, what do you feel you can do that the big boys can't? Because they're giving, I think a lot of those perfumers almost seem trapped, like if they are someone that is kind of artistic or they want to go their own way, the big houses aren't going to let them, they're not going to let them grow in that way. They're going to want them to stick to the brief, just do what they're told, and I think that's why perfumers like Antoine Lee ended up leaving that structure and going kind of towards the houses that back, over the last couple decades, like Atat Libre d'Orange and some of those other houses, and now doing stuff for YouTube. And even he can kind of thrive, he can do his own thing.
Yeah, and even some of the people within the industry, like Jean-Claude Elena, if you've seen the BBC perfume documentary where he visits I think it's the IFF training school, and it's pretty obvious that the instructor's like, don't listen to him too much. He's kind of a wild man. He's off in the woods doing his own thing there. But he gets free reign because he was Hermes's house perfumer, and that was what he said went. But I think it must be really frustrating. And actually, having read accounts of perfumers and things like Elena's the green tea fragrance that he did for Bulgari was something that he was doing in his spare time that he just thought was really good, and no one wanted him to do it. No one wanted it for a while, and then it became this like freebie that Bulgari was giving away with their watch purchases or something. I don't know. I've just had 13 years of access to whatever I could find to play with, and all the time in the world in my spare time to, just develop my own approach, which I think really now has served me well, I guess.
Yeah, that's amazing. No, thanks for sharing that. So you told me, and you sounded rather proud that you were kind of the one that did it all. You were like the man behind the product. You did the bottles, the labels, the juice, you created it. Do you find that you kind of have to keep that, like you have to get your hands in the soil and get them dirty and do it yourself to keep the quality? And is it almost like you're having like finding other, if you outsource the quality of what you're kind of putting out would be missing, or what's the idea behind kind of keeping it all as a one-man shop still?
Well, I mean, part of it is necessity. I'm just doing it on such a small scale that if I wanted to, I've got 15 fragrances, and if I wanted to have them compounded for me, I'd have to, usually the minimum is about 5 kilos of concentrate, which is, I've never made a kilo of concentrate of anything. So there's that. But there's also the fact that I use a lot of really idiosyncratic materials that I've, just developed sources for, a lot of them in India. Natural materials like on Monday night, you were reading some descriptions off Perfumery, I think, that were using the Latin names for plant materials that I use that are common fragrance materials in India, but not in Western perfumery at all.
Never heard of some of those.
So like Sagan Mantri and Sorrow. I think Sorrow wasn't the one in silver that you were reading about. And they're not like super, like Sorrow is a cheap fragrance that's usually used for health purposes, I think. It's kind of camphoraceous. I use things that you wouldn't really find in a standard perfume lab, I guess.
So it would be hard to kind of make it, in mass scale. You're not at that point yet. If you got to that point, if Clandestine Laboratories kind of blew up and got to that point, would you quit your job and kind of make this a full-time thing if you could? Like, are you passionate enough about it that it would be your full-time?
I'd love to. It's something I enjoy. I really, my full-time job, I work in a commercial darkroom. I make other people's art, and I'm not, they're not advertising that fact. I don't, but I'm also working under my boss, who, is the public face of the business. And all that's fine. That's the business model. But I'm basically just, a lab rat in the back. And, the last 15 months, I guess, that I've gotten some, public recognition, it's just been like really crazy. I mean, like I'm meeting all these people, meeting you, meeting your audience. But I've just, I've met a ton of people, and people like want to meet me, which is crazy. So, I'm not just some nerdy guy who's slaving away in obscurity. So it's the thought of just, having that kind of freedom with my time, and the ability to just spend it connecting with people and making things creatively. It's a dream.
Did you ever think you would be doing this when you started? Did you ever think it would get to this point, 12 or 13 years ago?
I did, strangely I did. It was always kind of my intent. And I was always afraid that I was going to like blow up too suddenly and be just totally overwhelmed. But I never thought about like some of the, like I thought of it as this like, anonymous mob of consumers on the internet all of a sudden like, picking me dry of product. But I didn't think about the fact that, that I'd be interacting directly with so many people, and that, people would be so supportive generally. It's just been like, the fragrance community, it really is a community. There's sub-communities in it. And I feel like I've found my people within that, but it's been magical.
I found the same thing. We talked a little bit about that on Instagram, just, because I've only been doing the channel now for a little over a year, and it's crazy just how many, how supportive people are. And, there are some communities that are very unwelcoming and harsh, and, in the fragrance community I found has been almost that's one of the things I would say that surprised me the most in doing this. Is I wasn't expecting the generosity and the support and all that stuff, and so I'm glad you're seeing that too.
Yeah, and I mean it's funny because I've been on Base Notes since 2010 under a different name until recently, and I wasn't very active there because my experience there was just so negative. I mean, there's just so many, in the perfumery forums as opposed to the fragrance forums. It's kind of a nightmare. There's so many know-it-alls who are just trying to help and who don't really know what they're talking about, but are adamant that they're, really smart, and, they're just starting out often. Whereas, when I rejoined as Clandestine Laboratories, and I've just been kind of mostly active on a thread that someone created, that I now use to kind of communicate with people there. It's just been amazing. I mean, it's, people are so positive and so, enthusiastic, and it's encouraging.
Alan says he's on the wait list for Assam. Can he be moved to the top of that list, please?
Well, there's no real wait list. It's just once it gets back in stock, you'll get an email. Unfortunately. I'm currently making a much larger batch of Assam. And I'm trying not to, Well, actually, that's something we should talk about because I thought your critiques of it were pretty valid actually, and I'm not going to like put down my own fragrance because a lot of people really like it, but it's something that I think the original finished version was made in 2012, I think, or maybe 2013.
I'm going to spray some while you're talking. Please continue.
It just sat on my shelf for ages because I got really disappointed that I couldn't get any more similar oud, and not an expensive oud, just it had particular qualities. India. It's
Indian.
Yeah, as far as I know, it's Assam oud. And
yeah, sorry, brain fart there.
And so when I had basically the original version sold out very quickly and was surprisingly popular, and so then I started out and people started asking me like, when are you going to make more? Is there going to be more? And so I really started, buying ouds and trying to, buying from the place I bought it, just trying to find something that would work again, which I did. But there was also the black tea material had disappeared. I used the green peppercorns that is, as you've observed, is in a lot of my fragrances.
That's your signature.
Yeah, it was. It was early on. Excuse me. And unfortunately, I was getting it from Liberty Natural, which is a natural material supplier in Oregon. And they just, right before I was about to buy a huge amount of it, they discontinued it in like 2012 and haven't had it since. And so, I just had this, small bit that I'd used for composition, and it was dwindling down. And so part of the challenge of recreating Assam was to get that note right, and while also replacing the black tea and the oud and so on, and without radically changing it, hopefully. And I got it pretty good, and I thought it just needed to age for a bit. And then as it aged, it just had this like kind of white quality. It was very clean, and that was kind of nice, but it was just too clean. So I ended up finishing it by adding, as you noted, possibly too much saffron to give it a bit more warmth. And but then I also added a really high grade, really stinky Assam oud, just a bit, which really kind of it sweetened up the bergamot and the kind of soapiness in a way that just worked like the original, I guess.
Did you find, because I saw oud in a couple other of your fragrances, this is not the only one with oud, right? Do you find that working with oud is kind of a different beast altogether? Is it something you've kind of had to learn how to use? And when my critique of it was my personal taste, I still think this is a good fragrance. I just prefer my oud to be, I have a sickness, as Russian Adam says. I always want stuff to be more animalic, more challenging, more oud, more castoreum, more.
You want a more solid.
Exactly.
Yeah, and the thing that people seem to like about it is that it's very different than normal. I think there's a lot of ouds out there now that use oud as a main note.
Yes.
I tend to use it more like civet, where it's or I'll use cheap stuff that's not super stinky as a building block. But for the stinky stuff, I find it works really well because it lasts forever.
Yes.
It works well as kind of an animalic tweak to floral notes and edible notes and citrus in Assam. It blends nicely with tea. Certain qualities that we do. And of course there's as there's a ton of different qualities of ouds too. So that's when you learn one, you're not necessarily going to understand what to do with another one. It's a very different odor profile.
Yeah, that's good stuff. Thanks for sharing. Nikki asks, and I think Nikki's a perfumer too, by the way. He says, Mark, are there any materials that you dislike the smell but like to work with, given the effect and what they do within a formula? Good question.
I mean, does anyone like pure civet?
I do. I don't like skunk oil though. That is vile. Woo!
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I mean, there's some materials that I just hate, like aldehyde C12MNA, which is used for incense accords. If I can smell it in a fragrance, I don't like the fragrance.
You're out. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I use it in minute amounts, and it works okay for me, but I just tend to avoid it. There's another one actually, Moroxide. I think just it's described as smelling like myrrh, but it doesn't smell like any of the very pleasant qualities of myrrh. I'm still kind of learning to use that one in extreme moderation. I smelled it in actually the DS and Durga fragrance recently, and I was just like, oh god. I'm trying to think about ones that I use regularly that I don't really like. I mean, I think at first I didn't like woody amber chemicals because they all, when I was first starting out, I read these descriptions of them. And I thought, oh, woody and ambery, that sounds great. And then I got them, and I couldn't really tell the difference. They all smelled like rubbing alcohol to me.
They're brutal. They'll rip the inside of your nose out.
Yeah, especially when you're not used to them, strangely. And then, but then as I started using stuff like ambrosinite, actually, is just wonderful for bringing volume to other woods and not being noticeable on its own. What else? I mean, skatol. I love skatol, which is like indol's bigger brother. I was saying recently on some comment, but
that's a tough thing to say you love because that has a sort of poopy side to it, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, people say poopy. I'd say it's more halitosis. The poopy things really have a strong sulfur component, I would say, and that that aren't used. There's nothing that's truly that poopy that's used in perfumery.
Right.
Yeah, indole and skatol, I'd say, are more like halitosis than poop. They're in poop, but the other stuff in poop is just what gives it its more horrible qualities.
Just a follow-up, Nikki says, or are there materials you like the smell of but find hard to work with?
Yeah, natural rose oil and absolute, I think, are beautiful by themselves. I find them a little. What am I trying to say? I feel like it's easier to make a fragrance with a rose note that's artificial than it is to use the absolutes, because I don't know, they seem to have a very specific effect, or in fragrance that's not necessarily what I'm going for.
Rose can also be very harsh on the skin, right?
Yeah, I mean, pure. Yeah, it's heavily restricted by IFRA, especially the distilled oil. I think
yeah.
It's also incredibly expensive.
Yeah, right. Roger Graves, who's actually Justin in disguise, says, what are some of your favorite fragrances? Gee, I think we talked about that a little bit earlier.
Yeah, I mentioned Coriandre by Jean Patou. But you're kind of asking the wrong guy, because like I was saying earlier, I don't know many commercial fragrances at all. Fine fragrance. That's not my background. And I've still stayed fairly ignorant, sheltered, whatever.
But on purpose.
Yeah.
So how does Mark Sage from 12, 13 years ago, who started the journey, differ from the Mark Sage that is kind of sitting here and talking to us today? What have you learned over these 13 years that has kind of changed your outlook on perfumery?
Well, I mean, experience and confidence for sure. And also realizing that there's not, when you first start in a professional field where you don't have access to training or any of the knowledge that's been, amassed over hundreds of years, you feel like you're, shut out from this club of secret knowledge, and you'll never, necessarily be as good, or, there were times where it seemed totally insurmountable to me. Like around 2013, I started to feel like I was going to quit because I couldn't get access to a lot of materials. I felt like I didn't really know what I was doing.
How'd you get through that?
Well, actually, 2013, Perfumer Supply House came online, and so I was finally able to get ambrosinite again and damascenone again, and then also I emailed one of the hobbyist suppliers creating perfume, and actually this was probably 2012. I wrote them a really cranky email saying like, the way you've got your products described, I can't tell what's exactly what, and I don't know what the dilutions are, and I'm just trying to make stable formulas here, And I think I think there's a lot of people out there who are similar to me who are trying to develop fragrances, and I think you should emphasize more curing single aroma chemicals and just listing them as by their proper names, which they did, and then they just, and I can't take credit for it necessarily, but they started adding a lot of stuff that that I hadn't smelled before, and I found a chemical supplier in India that was selling in small quantities at the time that I started buying from, and it just, things changed, and and I think also with the possibly along with the increased availability, more people got interested, and there started to be more information available, and it started to become more of a recognized cultural trend, I guess. So let me think. I mean, I know what I'm doing now. When I first started, I just didn't. I had no idea what, I had no idea how to, I didn't even know not to dilute things in vodka,
It's funny because when I did a interview, when I interviewed Russian Adam, he kind of shocked me because he said that he didn't even know what a Chypre or what a Fougere was, or what were you in the same boat?
I still don't. I mean, I could tell you, but I don't have a mental reference. If I smell something, I wouldn't necessarily go, "Oh, that's a Fougere." It's, and Scented Devil has been, other people have been great in terms of one of the wonderful things about getting some public presence has been the fact that other people are explaining my work to me in a way that based on knowledge that I just don't have. And so, people will tell me, "Oh, that's a Fougere, that's a Chypre," and I was like, "Oh, I thought it was a Fougere. It's a Chypre, really? Okay."
That is very interesting. Very.
But
interesting.
I also don't, because I don't compose along those lines. I don't set out being like, "Oh, I'm going to make a Chypre here, and I need this and this and this." It's always, I'm trying to do something new, so I'm always trying to create a new structure.
That could be an answer to the previous question too, as far as an advantage goes. I mean, I'm sure there's very few perfumers that would approach it in that way, I guess, right?
I can't imagine any professional. It's very hit or miss.
Yeah. Nikki was agreeing that the base notes threads can be brutal for in the perfume side of in the creative side of things, anyways.
Oh my God. The last time I commented, I got so annoyed with people, and I just shut down and closed that account.
It's funny because I said that there's a lot of support in the community, and there is, and I would say probably 99.9% is support, but the 0.1 that aren't, they can be very vocal. You know what I mean?
I've encountered some of those too recently.
Yep. Greetings, Boz. Thanks for being here. Keith asks, what grade of ambergris did you use in silver?
There's no actual ambergris. It's a note.
There you
go. People have been convinced that there was natural ambergris in it, but it's and that's I think there's a lot of frustration and cynicism in the perfumery community. I've noticed that among consumers. That a lot of brands take advantage of I don't know how to put it, but there's a lot of hooey out there about what's actually in the fragrances and why 100%. They're so expensive.
Absolutely.
I think the thing for people to for consumers to understand is that there's a radical difference between commercial fragrance and artisanal indie fragrance, and that's the economy of scale. When you're a commercial company, you can put untold money into R&D if you anticipate, selling a lot of units. You can also make, really cheap formulas because of economies of scale. And a lot of I think it's something like what's inside the bottle, including the alcohol, is usually about 3% of the retail price in commercial fragrance. And they compensate for that by creating this marketing illusions like, oh, we've used this rare, unique, purple rose from, somewhere or other. And
Yep.
Yeah. And it's, I think they're doing themselves a disservice, and they're doing perfumery a disservice, because to me, the wonderful thing about perfumery is the fact that you can create illusions with smell. That's all it is. I mean, you don't want something that smells, just like a rose realistically does, because, it smells like a rose. There's no reason to have more than one of them. Yeah. And so people really get hung up on this, quality natural materials stuff, and assuming that high-priced fragrances are high-priced because of the ingredients in them, which is not true. I can tell you from personal experience.
You see these brands, and they will show, like, if you look at the advertisement, they'll show the ambergris and the rose, but then when you actually look into it, there's usually very little of that actually in there, right? It's
I mean, I'm sure Creed is no longer using real ambergris, if they ever did.
Yeah, if they ever did, right? It could have been salty ambroxan. Although I will say, Creed, I think the thing that's frustrating to consumers nowadays is the price hikes, which are continual and brutal. I mean, the price of perfumery is absolutely out of control. And like Creed, as an example, is a house that used to take formulas and just, Olivier Creed was well known for just almost being the laughing stock in the perfume community, because he didn't really understand how to keep costs down. He would just tell them to use the highest quality materials back in the day. But I think it's gotten to a point where even these high-end brands like Rojas and Creeds and, these niche brands that sell their products for triple, 4 or 5 times what yours go for, you smell them and you don't get the quality ingredients that you used to in the past. It's all about money, and it's all about, when you're only about money, you can't really be creative. It's hard to create something for art's sake when you're just trying to make money. Like your goal cannot be to make money as a house, to me. I mean, you have to have a bigger goal. You have to have a plan. You have to have, foresight. You have to have passion. And if they're just passionate about money, it's really tough. And to your point about, the cost of the materials, I think there was a perfumer, I forget who it was. I'm sure someone can leave it in the chat, but he actually published the formula of one of the Tom Fords. It might've been Amber Absolute, and it ended up being like $2.20 or something for the actually in the bottle,
I think Christoph published that after Brooklyn Fragrance Lover died.
Who was that?
I think Christoph Laudemille published
That's right. Yep.
But that's the thing, is that there's really wonderful materials that are cheap. There's really sucky materials that are expensive. It's just, it's not a, but also, it's not a perfumery is not curation. It's not finding the finest example of this and the finest example of that and throwing them together. It's, it's creating illusions and, and using things in a sensitive way that creates, emotion, feeling. It's an art. It should be. It also happens to be a commercial field, which creates problems. But I would, just to continue what I was saying about the, difference between indie artisanal stuff and commercial, is that it's unbelievably daunting for someone like me to try to make something that can compete with commercial fragrance, because I don't have the budget, I don't have the staff, I don't have the time. Their perfumers can write down a formula and they have someone go into the lab and mix it for them and bring it back, and they're like, change it again. It's all me. And what's really expensive for me is my time and the overhead involved. And I have to live. I need an apartment. I need health insurance. And we're selling. Me and people like me are selling things at such a small scale and also, paying much more for the raw materials than these big companies do. And so it's really kind of like not fair to, compare our prices to larger enterprises. I think, there's obviously a tendency to raise prices as you become more successful and as demand increases. That's kind of inevitable for anyone trying to make a living at something or make money at something. But it's really not cynical. I see people charging. I really try to keep my prices fairly modest. I mean, compared to others. I know they're not,
right.
But I think if people saw the amount of time involved, and the fact that, like I said, I have to pay my rent. If you want someone to make fragrance for you that's done on a small scale, you have to consider that, you're paying for a lot of things that aren't in the bottle, and they're not marketing or packaging like with the big ones, or, corporate profits for shareholders. They're, bread and butter stuff.
Yeah. They're not paying for your advertisements on, on the big channels or anything like that, like the big houses do. So yeah,
I'm not putting samples in magazines.
And I agree with you as far as perfumery being a little bit of a magical trick, because like you take something like Jean-Claude Elena's Rose and Queer. I love that fragrance. There's no rose, there's no queer in it, at least not to my nose. There's geranium and maybe the tiniest amount of leather, and that's it. But literally on the bottle it says Rose and Queer, but you'll smell rose, but I don't think there's any in there, and Elena was kind of the master of doing that. And and that's kind of, I think, where the good perfumers can kind of really show their hand, is they can kind of make you smell something that maybe isn't there or you think is there. They kind of play tricks with you, and so it's a story. To me, it's an art. My favorite perfumes, when I smell a fragrance and I get this like visual representation of something, almost like I'm reading a book. Like you can see all the little details. And so I consider it an art form. It's but it is a shame that it's kind of turning into something where, as an enthusiast, if you want to go buy just a fragrance from Macy's, I mean, it's just in the last couple of years, the starter fragrances, the prices are outrageous. I mean, go try to buy Bleu de Chanel, and you might as well just get an indie fragrance and get something. I mean, the price extra is actually not that much more when you really think about $130 for Bleu de Chanel now, or whatever it is. It's insane.
Yeah. And I would say, like I said, a lot of the marketing is about, natural materials but also exclusivity. And if you're buying commercial fragrance, the only sense in which you're buying exclusivity is if it's priced too high for most people to afford. That's it. It's not, they're not, unless, it's some rare limited, edition thing. But, and so actually that was part of when I was doing market research early on, because I always thought that I wanted to, create a brand, because it seemed like a good, creative outlet, but also a good, there's an audience, and they, people want to buy fragrances. When I first started researching it, oh no, I may have lost my train of thought there. My brand name, my Clandestine Laboratories, actually was a result of reading a book about business, and one of the things you have to kind of explain to people is what's your unique value proposition. And what I could think of at the time was like, well, no one knows me. Like I'm totally unknown. No one else is wearing my fragrance. If someone wears it, that's them, and that's it. And so I think that's actually one of the also value propositions of indie perfumery, is that not only are you getting a ton of a person's time and personal attention in that fragrance, but also you're getting true exclusivity, because it's not very well known. And
I can promise no one was walking around at my work wearing Film Noir except for me today. So
it's probably like 4 people in Texas who have a bottle of it.
Unless there's a secret frag head at work I don't know about. So here's a question I've gotten a lot, and I'm sure you have too. Do you only ship in the USA? If you don't only ship in the people who I've heard are really getting hit on this is you and Darren Allen. They want you and Darren Allen to ship overseas. Is that on the docket, or what's the plans there?
I was saying that it is. I'm reconsidering that just because I've got too much going on right now. I'm about to start being represented by American Perfumer, which is going to bring I assume quite a few more people to my audience.
Nice. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, it's, oh my God, I'm very excited about that. It's such a good fit. And,
tell us about that. I'm not familiar with what that means.
Well, so it's, what am I trying to say? I've had actually several companies approach me for, to do retail representation, including the owner of, Lucky Scent emailed me the other day and was like trying to, convince me to play stuff with him. And I've really held off on that because, for one thing, I sell direct through my website. If you're selling retail, you get 50%, 50 cents on the dollar for sale. And, I'm doing such a small volume of production that it doesn't, I can't see selling my stuff at, half price basically. And
it might increase your, how do you say, it might increase the amount of eyeballs that get on your brand though. And stuff like this.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's actually why I was interested. Well, partly also a friend of mine told me I'd be a great fit with Dave, which is true. Dave Curran is a really good guy. I love the hell out of him already. I've talked to him maybe 4 times on the phone. But he's someone who's just very sincerely committed to American indie perfumery, American artisanal perfumery. And he's not in it for the money. He's very supportive. But also they do, I'm trying to say the word be cross-branded limited edition fragrances, which 2 of them so far I think have won the Art and Olfaction Award for artisanal perfumery.
Interesting.
So far he started in 2019, I think.
Is that his website, AmericanPerfumer.com, or? I
think it's American-perfumer.com. And he's in Louisville. Anyway, but he represents, kind of the names in American artisanal perfumery. There's, Christoph Laudemule, Don Spencer Hurwitz, Chronotope. I'm probably forgetting some really obvious ones. January Scent Project.
Okay.
People that I thought before I got connected with him, I thought, oh, this would be, great to be on that list.
DSH, Henley.
Henley.
Ray.
Yep. Yeah. Bloodline is the one that Henley did with American Perfumer, won one of the Art and Olfaction Awards. And
that is an amazing fragrance, by the way. That is fantastic.
I've not smelled it, but
I've only, someone sent me the tiniest drop because it is so hard to come by. Bottles are very rarely come up of it, but it is a fantastic fragrance. So is it like an exclusive then? Like if you did a fragrance for, like, could they then only buy it at American Perfumer?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm going to do one actually. I can't talk about the details yet, but
no, sure.
It's in the works.
I won't hold your feet to the fire, but that's good stuff.
Yeah.
So you guys get exclusive info here.
Right. First time in public. So yeah, and I think the announcement for them carrying me is probably going to be in the next couple of weeks.
Awesome. That's good stuff, man.
Yeah. So that should, bring some interest. But anyway, this was a long roundabout way of answering the question about international shipping. Lucky Scent's tempting because they do ship internationally, but I just committed to American Perfumer. I also hear they only pay 40%. I don't want to be a small fish in a big pond. So far I've only sold through my website, and that's kind of part of my my brand identity or whatever is that I'm not a commercial brand. I just I sell stuff to people directly, and I have direct personal relationships with people who buy from me. An American perfumer is a type of business that's it's a small family business. It's it's just such a great fit. I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, I've never heard about it. I put the link up on the chat right here so you guys can check it out. I've never actually checked that website out. So once we're done, I'm gonna go look. GMG says brands like Creed or Amouage used to splurge on raw materials. At least they were worth the price tag back in the day. It's tough now to justify some of those high prices. Nikki says he'd much rather support you, Mark, than some huge corporate conglomerate any day. Loved how you say it's about invoking an emotional response. Duncan asks, where is he from? This is Mark Sage from Clandestine Laboratories. And his website is clandestinelaboratories.com. And pretty soon you'll find him on American Perfumer. So there you go. Let's see. There were some more questions that I kind of gathered from the audience over the last week or so since I knew you were coming on. One of them was, if you could work with one rock star perfumer from the past, like Pierre Bourdon or Jean-Claude Elena, Edmund Rudnitska, who would it be? Do you have an idol in the perfume industry from the past?
Well, I mean, that's difficult to answer because I don't know most of their work. Most of those people, I don't know anything they've composed at all. I would say simply based on the fact that he was, now I'm blanking on his name, an educator. And, oh God, who's the guy who did Canoe and Magritte?
Jean Carleo?
Yeah, Jean-Carl. Simply because I've been inspired by some of the things that he wrote and said.
He's the head of the Osmotech right now.
Really? I didn't even know he was still alive.
Oh yeah, Jean Carleo. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I don't know if he did Canoe. Did he do? Let me look it up.
Yeah. No, not Carleo. It's Jean-Carl.
Ah, yes. Okay. Yeah.
The Jean-Carl method of which I find overly laborious. But
very nice. Keith says, hopefully someday you'll ship to Canada. I've gotten that shipping question a million times. Like, I think that's
I get that twice a week from people. From people in Australia, Canada. Canada will be the first one, and I'm tempted to add Canada, simply because it's part of part of NAFTA and customs aren't an issue. It's really, for me, it's just I'm often filling orders like before I go to work in the morning, and it just I don't have time to shower these days. Sometimes, like it's really it's hard to work full time and do this, and I just really have to kind of limit my focus for now.
I can imagine. I mean, when you say you're a one-man shop, do you have somebody? Do you have like a support group that kind of helps you at all? Do you literally do it all from soup to nuts, everything? I do it all. I have someone who comes over, and in exchange for access to my lab and teaching, she basically keeps an eye on me while I'm mixing batches and reads things off and checks them off, which is incredibly useful. I would screw things up so badly otherwise, because unlike composing a fragrance, mixing batches is it's boring, it's routine. There's a lot of steps to some of the materials where I have to unthaw them if they're if they've turned solid, and it's just very easy to get distracted and add too much of something or the wrong thing, or and then you have to dump a whole bunch of materials. Yes. Did you have any problems? Like I've heard like when you have your own brand like that and you're kind of doing it all, even some of the smallest things that you wouldn't think are an issue kind of pop up, like the little samples that you put your things in, the bottles, like finding the bottles themselves. Like someone once told me that they like one of these bottle companies wanted them to buy like 10,000 bottles or he wouldn't, stuff like that. What have been some of your challenges you've come across?
Oh, everything you described there. Yeah. well, I mean, one example is the labels. Took me a long time to figure out like how to make a label that I liked. I did have actually, I hired a professional graphic designer to do the logo.
Okay.
So the CLNY and the front of the business card is done professionally. And then and then also the Clandestine Laboratories there is her work. But the label actually took me a while to figure out like how to make it not look. Actually, that's the wrong side. The other side was done professionally.
This one, yeah.
Which is much more elegant and clean.
Very clean.
But the black logo on the other side was her work also. I mean, our work. I worked very closely with her, and it was a real pain in the ass until I got exactly what I wanted out of it. Sorry to say. But yeah, every step of the way, it's just there's things to figure out. How to filter fragrances. A lot of people, don't realize like, filtration is a important thing.
Yeah, you'll get
packaging. Yeah. Like I just finally bought, proper vacuum filtration equipment.
Oh, nice. Let me blow you up so they can see. Let's see. Can I? Yes, solo. Boom. There you go. Ah, nice.
So that's the top part of this. I just bought 9 of these, so because the has a very fine filter in it that traps things.
Can you show them your lab? You showed me at the beginning your working lab, just so they can see what the Clandestine Laboratories lab looks like.
So, I'm tipping my computer, but I'm using an auxiliary camera right now.
There you go. Look at that.
It's, it's a mortar and pestle. There's shelves full of working materials. Behind me, there's a refrigerator and a top-loading freezer that are just chock full of materials. You can't see there's I'm facing toward another workbench, and there's drawers under it with all sorts of things, and I've got drawers full of raw material everywhere.
That's awesome.
It's a little insane.
I love it. I love your little lab, man. That's good stuff. So you mentioned you actually answered one of my questions without even asking, because I was going to say, did you ever get to a moment where you thought you just were going to quit? I know whenever I did the interview with Liz Moore, she made a fragrance. She's the owner of Papillon, which is a niche brand that I absolutely love, or an indie brand I absolutely love. And she was saying that she made her very first fragrance was Anubis, and Anubis was she thought it was amazing. It was a huge hit. And then she hit this wall, and she was like, maybe it was like a fluke. Maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe I just got lucky. Who am I? I'm not Chanel. Why would anyone care about my fragrances? And she kind of got down on herself. And you kind of answered that question earlier, where there was a point where you did kind of struggle. What was the point where you knew, hey, I've got something that I think is amazing and I kind of want to share with the world? Did you have that breakthrough moment where you think, hey, I'm actually going to do this?
Probably about a year later. Once I started getting access to more materials, I was really kind of off to the races, and I had looking back at my, my lineup right now, 2015 and 2016 were really kind of big years in terms of me finishing fragrances or creating things that are part of the line. I actually thought I was planning on launching in 2016, but I ended up, I used to live on the Upper East Side across from the 2nd Avenue subway construction, and they finished the construction, and rents in my neighborhood started just skyrocketing. I got a lease renewal form that was, 15% higher rent. And I saw the writing on the wall there. I just wasn't going to be able to afford to stay. And I was working at just a tiny apartment. I had my computer balanced on top of a speaker, and my lab was like one corner of my living room across from the kitchen, which was also in the living room. So I realized, I was the only smart thing to do would be to, buy a place. So I started looking, and I looked at some places on the Upper East Side, which were depressingly expensive. And then, so anyway, long story short, I ended up buying a place in the Bronx and moving here, which took, a lot of work, and was really, moving in and setting up my perfumery space. And then my dad was had developed Parkinson's, and it was really, going downhill. And so that kind of, anyway, life happened. And
sorry to hear that. Yeah. Parkinson's.
So, yeah. What? So I didn't actually end up, and I'd been sitting on the website, actually, clandestinelaboratories.com, which I was amazed was available. And I think I got it in 2013 or 2014.
Nice.
But I just been sitting on it for years. And finally, I launched the website in December of 2019.
Oh, wow. Okay. I didn't realize it was that late of a launch. So you were just, what were you doing before that? Just word of mouth, just friends and stuff like that, or?
Not selling much, really. I'd make stuff for my girlfriend. She wore, things that she really liked for years. And yeah, a few of our friends were wearing things, but really almost no one. And then, and when I launched, I didn't know, I had no connection to the fragrance community at all. And I was really kind of, I've always been very shy about showing my work in general. And so, I put the website up and announced it on Instagram, and that was basically it. And, barely sold a thing. And then COVID happened. I lost my job. I went on unemployment, and I just completely freaked out because when I applied for unemployment, it turns out that if you have a business, and even if it's not making money, you're not eligible for unemployment, which, I'd been working my job for 22, 23 years at that point. And it was my only source of income. And long story short, I shut down the website, total panic, and was like, what am I doing? This is crazy. I didn't realize that I wouldn't be able to get unemployment if I had business. And then I got rehired in December and reopened it. But the funny thing is, if anyone asks, when did Clandestine Laboratories start? I couldn't really tell you. And all of the dates on my fragrance releases on Base Notes and Fragrantica are not accurate.
What do they say? Because on Parfumo, they don't say anything.
On Base Notes, I think almost all of them say 2021, just because
okay.
Scented Devil got them to list them, and he just, that was when he discovered it, and when I first started really actually having any public profile. So yeah.
So a lot of them are these last 15 months, you've gotten a lot of accolades. It's really been since the website's only been up for the last, 3 or 4 years, basically, right?
Not even that, because I took it down and then put it up again. So yeah, it's been up continuously since, really December, 2020.
Nice.
And barely any attention until, fall of 2021, basically, when he started reviewing stuff, and then other people started reading.
Things have been really speeding up for you lately, huh?
It's been really crazy. I get emails from people all over the world now, and people That's know awesome. Who I am. And I reached out to John Beeble from January Scent Project, and I assumed he's pretty well known. And he's like, hey, man, I've been wanting to try your stuff. And I'm like, you know who I am? Really? That's amazing. I've gotten that reaction from a few people. And I'm like, I can't believe that you actually know who I am.
It's good stuff. You're a celebrity in the community, in the fragrance community already.
Apparently. What's also crazy is that I've developed a following among intelligence veterans and people who work in the FBI, NSA, CIA, because there's a podcast called Spycraft 101, and the guy who runs it randomly discovered me. I think because I hashtagged something clandestine. His tagline is "Your Clandestine Classroom," and he does interviews with intelligence vets and things on his podcast, and people who have crazy stories about the Cold War activities, and so. I've started sponsoring the podcast. I started in December, I think, and I've got all these followers. Now I have a fan who's an FBI agent who might even be watching right now, and
that's awesome.
Veterans, and it's crazy. Someone told me I was a legend the other day.
Really? Whenever I did my interview with Russian Adam, that's actually something he said. He said, "I'm not a legend. I'm not. I'm just a guy who loves perfume. I'm just like you guys." But I guess you get that. I mean, when you get to the level that you guys are at, you get that. There are people that just absolutely love your work, and it's gonna happen. But that's good stuff.
Yeah, I mean, like I know 2 rock stars now who are like, who are fans of mine, which is crazy.
Nikki says that's a sexy little lab that you have.
Hey.
Housing is one thing I don't miss about New York City, is what he says.
Yeah.
Nick says, are there particular materials that you find more challenging to work with? I think we talked a little bit about this earlier.
Yeah. I mean, in a nutshell, I hate aldehyde, C12MNA, and peroxide. I just have issues with.
Alan says he just purchased 7 samples from American Perfumer. Thank you. So there you go.
Wait, mine? No.
Which ones did you get?
I haven't looked on the website yet. It's possible they're already listed.
Are they listed on there already? Let's see. Brands. I don't see Clandestine Laboratories yet. But I think he was probably saying maybe 7 different indie.
That's a funny coincidence because they're starting with 7 of mine.
Nice. How many do you have? You have 15 in total.
Yeah, I think so, including the limited releases, which are not all in stock currently.
Alan says, I'm afraid that most of us here needn't worry much about intelligence. Interference says he's late to the party. Who are the rock stars that you've met?
I don't want to say.
Can't divulge that. The FBI will come for him.
Exactly. One of them is pretty active on bass notes, though.
Interesting. So where do now that kind of you've been blowing up over the last 15, 18 months or so, where how do you see kind of the future of Clandestine Laboratories playing out? Do you have kind of a plan for the future of the company?
I mean, this is going to be a lame response, but I'd like to keep on building recognition and a larger following. Basically, I would like to get the ability to work full time at this and make it my career. I'm pretty limited in terms of the amount of time now that I can spend on creating new stuff because I'm either at work or filling orders a lot of the time or dealing with trying to source things for existing fragrances. I joked online. I think that my ultimate goal is world domination and enslavement through insanely addictive fragrance. So I've got some ambitions for sure. I'm gonna try to avoid going the venture capital route and suddenly opening a ton of stores worldwide and I want to expand organically through word of mouth really. And reach an audience that's really passionate about fragrance.
Well, I don't have a lot of subs like some channels, but I can tell you that the subscribers that are subscribed to me are some of the most knowledgeable people that I've ever come across. So there's a lot of knowledge that'll be kind of watching this. Here's a question that popped in my mind. Have you ever had any challenge? Have you had to reformulate your fragrances with kind of how's that process gone? Has that been kind of a pain sometimes with materials changing or IFRA regs or anything like that?
Yeah, it is people in terms of IFRA, people bemoan the loss of real oak moss all the time, and there's this alleged new oak moss ban, which is actually not a ban; it is not new, but the real kicker for me more recently was Lyrol, which and for everyone, it was in everything. It's a beautiful, soft lily of the valley material that performs really well. It diffuses. It lasts a long time. Just beautiful stuff. And it's also an allergen. And IFRA finally decided, and actually the EU, I think, really put the kibosh on it. So
European Cosmetic.
Sorry.
Is it it's the European Cosmetic Council or?
Yeah,
Something like that, right?
yeah, and IFRA base. I think people misunderstand IFRA a little bit. I mean, I have some major frustrations with the way they do things. They make it very difficult to. They make compliance difficult for small people, unless you spend days like I did compiling all the information into your own database that's actually usable. But IFRA is really, kind of an industry organization that was created in order to kind of forestall heavy-handed government regulations and outright bans. A lot of governments have the attitude that fragrance is not an essential thing, and so it's regulated much more harshly than foodstuffs because food serves a purpose. It's a necessity, and so you can have all sorts of stuff in food that you can't have in fragrance, kind of, or things like, for instance, peanuts are still legal to sell as food stuff, but they kill people.
Right.
None of the things that are being restricted in fragrance, like oak moss, is not gonna take anyone out, as far as I know.
I think that's maybe some of the concern, or maybe some of the frustration from the fragrance community, is it seems like they're kind of banning stuff that you can only now use if you get the 5 times more expensive special molecule that IFF makes. And it's, you know what I mean? It's kind of one of those things where I think they could easily just put a label. It would be great if they could just put a label on there,
That's my feeling.
Yeah,
I feel like warnings would be the way to go with consumers. I have issues, and I think a lot of it is simply just because if they didn't do it, the governments would, and the government EU stuff is very, like, I don't know if you've heard about, was it in Iceland? They've decided that school children can't eat their traditional dessert because it contains I think a little bit of cinnamon or nutmeg or something that has coumarin in it, and coumarin's a neurotoxin, and so you can't have that, and you can't expose children to that, even though it's a traditional food for their culture. And it's like the restrictions have devastated producers of some of the natural materials.
Have you ever thought about being non-IFRA compliant? What would that do to since you don't sell overseas? Is there, what do you think the advantages are to being IFRA compliant versus non-IFRA compliant?
It protects you from being sued. Basically, I mean, as I've said to other people who are complaining about how IFRA prevents them from doing things, I'm like, IFRA's not preventing you from doing anything. You can do it if you want.
You can do it, yeah.
You're perfectly welcome to sell people, an oak moss fragrance with tons of oak moss in it, but you have to accept responsibility for it. And I think that's probably scares people, and maybe rightly. It's I don't think you can get insurance as a business if you're not IFRA compliant, and but I try to comply because it's the best. It's the best. I'm trying to say it's the best game in town in terms of making safe fragrance. Even though, some of it I have issues with.
Yeah. Interference asks, are the 7 perfumes going to American Perfumer 7 new fragrances, or some of you from your current line?
Current line.
Okay. And then there'll be an additional.
The limited edition one will be something no one's even smelled yet.
Nice.
It was actually one I composed during lockdown in 2020. And I would have, there'd be samples of it out there, but I couldn't get cascarilla oil anymore, which I'd used in it. And I spent a bunch of time looking for a good source in small quantities, and just really couldn't find a thing. And then weekend before last, or maybe it was last weekend, I was looking at Perfumer's Apprentice, and they started carrying it. I was like, oh, great.
Nice. So before we go, why don't we run through your fragrances for those kind of not familiar with the line? I did some first impressions, but I thought it would be cool maybe to just chat with you about kind of what you think about how you perceive these. Or I already have Novochoc sprayed as and it is strong, but for those who aren't familiar with your work, tell us kind of a little bit about about Novochoc?
Well, Novochoc is based on, well, I mean, the name is a joke about the Russian nerve agent, Novochoc,
Right.
which is spelled differently.
It's a great name, by the way.
Thank
Great
you.
name for this fragrance.
Early on, actually, I got some people on base notes who were really offended with me that I was joking about this, and it's like, what's next? Is Zyklon B? And I'm like, really? It's not the same. I mean, it's a joke about the most famous incident with Novochoc was in Salisbury, where two hapless GRU agents tried to assassinate a former Russian spy and his daughter, and failed, and accidentally killed someone else, unfortunately. But the funny thing about it was that they brought it over and used it in a modified Nina Ricci perfume miniature bottle.
I heard about this. That's right. I've heard about this.
So I thought, oh, that's the perfect name. And this is actually why Spycraft found me, is because I posted a photo of it, and he was, with the hashtag clandestine, and he found it and just thought, it was like he was the first person who actually got the whole joke and posted about it and just loved it and loved my branding in general. And so the fragrance is an insane chocolate fragrance. It's I thought when I first released it, I thought I might be a little insane for releasing it, even because it's pretty over the top. I mean, it's big, and it's very different than I would say than anything I'd done previously. But I was also, I was very proud of it. It performs really well, and it's very original. It's not, it's not made with like chocolate extracts. It's not made with commercial bases. It's all, from scratch using aroma chemicals mostly. So actually, and it was the first fragrance I've released without wearing it myself or smelling it on my girlfriend. And just because, like you, I'm not a gourmand person. I just couldn't really imagine wearing this huge chocolate fragrance.
Right.
And then last summer, my girlfriend came over, and she was wearing this god awful, really sweet almond vanilla body oil. And I was like, this is just, I can't deal. You have to like cover it up inside, like try Novochoc. So I just put on some Novochoc. And we went for a walk in really hot weather, and then had a nice dinner at this Italian restaurant nearby. And it smelled great on her, and she really enjoyed wearing it. And that led to her starting to wear it all the time. Like, it's now knocked everything else out of the box for her. And
I could see that. Yeah.
She still wears film noir sometimes. She's still, every once in a while it's Astoria, which I haven't released yet. But then, a few days later, I tried wearing it because I thought, oh, it smells good on her. And I actually really enjoyed wearing it. Like the dry down, I find there's a lot of deer musk replacer in it, which gives it a kind of an animalic undertone.
Okay. Yeah, I was wondering what I was thinking maybe there was a hint of oud in here, because it does have a little bit of that animalic bit to it.
Yeah, there's some serious funk in there. That is part of the reason that performs so well too. And it, animal stuff tends to boost gourmand materials. So yeah, it's grown on me. And like I said, I'm very proud of it in terms of how original it is and how it performs.
Rachel might have the line of the live stream. You should do a line of spy-inspired fragrances.
Well, I mean, some of my name, like Covert, is still unreleased, and Enigma is named after the code breaking activities in World War II and the Enigma machine that the Germans were using.
That's a great story, by the way.
Yeah. I mean, the birth of computer science and Turing.
All because they had to destroy that one Enigma machine, before that sub went down. If they just would have destroyed it like they were supposed to, right? That's the only reason they got their hands on it.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Tiger says, I just purchased a Discovery Stash. Just purchased a Discovery Stash from your website. Stoked to smell your creations piece from Central New York. Good stuff.
Awesome. Glad to make a new connection.
Let's see. How about Assam? We talked a little bit about Assam, but tell us a little bit more about it, because it is a big saffron. And actually, you know what? On the card, I think I like it even more than on skin, interestingly enough, on paper.
Yeah, so Assam is, like I was saying, it's something I made fairly early on. Assam was actually inspired by the first time that I smelled oud, and I was like, I gotten a sample with an order of other stuff from India, and I just thought, this is oud is just too insanely expensive. I'll never want to use it. I don't understand why anyone would want to use something that expensive in fragrance.
Do you like using those high-end expensive materials?
If they're worth it, yeah. And ouds, I've learned are they have unbelievable performance. I think in they add something to fragrances that is not available through other materials, really. And also I'll say fake oud is not where it's at all. Like it might have similar qualities, but there's something about oud that's just so beautiful. That's not something you can fake, really, I don't think. So I got this oud and I was like, well, how can I extend this? How can I add all the things that have the same facets to just make it bigger and longer lasting, so so I can use it as some in things and not have to spend a fortune. So I started playing around, and then one thing led to another. I ended up adding black tea, and then I added a bergamot top note eventually. And the first composition I think was in 2010, and it was really lovely, but it just didn't last very long. Partly because the oud wasn't very high quality at all. But again, had qualities that I really like and that are now specific to the fragrance. So I finished it finally in 2012, and it just sat around because I just was very disappointed that I couldn't make more of it.
Yes, I have seen a couple comments pop up. One of them said, let's see if I can find it again out of the blue. Where did it go? One of them said you need to hurry up and get your assistant working to get the second batch of Assam up and running.
That would be the third batch.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. So the part of this, I guess, part of the story is then, once I realized I had this thing sitting around and people were expressing an interest in it, I was like, well, originally I was very committed to not doing, gimmicky limited releases or anything like that. But I kind of started to gradually realize like people really want that. And I've also realized part of the reason that they do is not just the exclusivity, but it's actually, becomes a social event online where, people talk about wanting it and then they get it and they, all experience it at the same time and they share their impressions and people post bottles, it's just, it's a FragCom thing. And I did the limited release of the, what I had on hand. And then I was like, well, that's it. And then people started bugging me about making more. And I started, I've gone over this before, but I spent some time, ordering different qualities of oud and trying to find something that worked and trying to figure out how to replace the other 2 or 3 materials that I couldn't get anymore, including the black tea note. I made a version I was pretty happy with, and I thought it just needed to age. And then finally, I realized it needed some good stinky oud in it too, to really get the full effect. And so finally, I made a version that really, I think, performs as well or better as the original. It has the same odor profile, really. Very happy with it so far. I may tweak it a little bit to, because I got some really high quality, where is it? I'm going to cover up the name of the place where I got it from, but this is $3,600 worth of high grade Cambodian.
Oh, nice.
That has a really, really nice kind of tea-like, subtly animalic profile. And so I may juice it with a bit of this to kind of bring up the oudy qualities, but also the tea.
I can completely see how somebody can kind of go down this rabbit hole with oud, because it's like there's an entire community, dedicated to oud, and there's so many little details. Like I know Kinam is a big thing in the oud community now, and I was really shocked to find Kinam has this very buttery, floral, kind of soft. It's completely opposite than what you would expect. The animalic fertilizer chips, this barnyard oud that many people associate it with. There's a whole other side, you can make oud smell like strawberry milk, or I mean, it's just crazy that the different scent profiles that can come from real oud. And then now, of course, it's the wild versus plantation. I could completely see how someone kind of go down this rabbit hole and just get lost in the oud world. It's interesting.
That's crazy. Yeah. And it's addictive. It's beautiful. Like once I got this bottle, I took to, I just swiped the top of it on the back of my hand before I went to work and smell it all day long, the different stages of it. It's just such a complex, wonderful material.
It is. Yeah. GMG asks, what's your best seller? Most of all, is there a specific reason why you think it's your best seller?
Silver is, actually. And
I like silver. Silver is very good.
Yeah, I think what I'm getting from people is just that it's wildly original. There's nothing else like it. Until recently, there were not even any other fragrances of a similar note description.
Right.
It's, and fossil amber is a really unusual material. It's, as I've learned, controversial because there's a lot of people who believe that, it doesn't have an odor, must be a fake Melba. There's a lot of people confusing it with the amber note that's usually listed in perfumery, which is a fancy, balsamic vanilla note.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people who confuse it with ambergris. But it's a real thing, I can tell you. I smelled it from several different suppliers. And I think the way that I combined it with the mint and the floral elements and it's different. People like
Let me spray it while we're talking about it, because I remember silver being just the dry down is what the opening was good, but I think I really liked that ambery dry down. I have a bunch of different ambers, but you're right. Yeah. I don't think I've never smelled the Dias and Durga that I've heard people compare to silver. So I've never smelled that fragrance, which is $700, by the way. They're quite proud of that pricing, but I will tell you.
I'll just say I'm very happy to say it's not at all the same.
Okay, I've never smelled that one, so it's the opening. What's that? What was the camphor-like note in the opening we were talking about on the live stream the other day? What note was that?
Sorrow.
That's right.
I can't remember you had the scientific name for it, but it's the local native name in Philippines, I think, is sorrow, or Indonesia. And there's also African helichrysum, which is very unlike the European. It's actually a fairly cheap, very camphoraceous material also. So it's you're getting it hit at first with this combination of mint materials and very camphoraceous stuff that kind of adds a little bit of an edge to the mint to make it not smell like not like toothpaste.
Yeah, no, it doesn't smell like toothpaste at all. There's that green pepper note that I think I'm starting to associate you with, and so I think the note you were mentioning is Cinnamosma fragrans.
It's a bark in the cinnamon family, or cinnamon camphor family.
Okay. And when did you make this?
The first version was 2010.
It was 2010. Okay, because I was going to say in the last 5 or 6 years or so, there's been a lot of fragrances that I've noticed come out in the indie space that have this blue lotus note. There's blue lotus in here, right?
Yeah, blue. I think blue water lily.
Okay.
There's two different species that are called blue lotus.
Yes. Yeah. So Sultan Pasha used it in his creation of there was a zoologist fragrance recently that used it that I really liked called Sacred Scarab. And I've noticed, Bortnikov uses it, and he's one of my favorite oud distillers with Russian Atom. And so that blue lotus note has been getting a lot of play, but it's interesting that you made this one in 2010 because
Yeah, because I was ahead of the curve.
That's good stuff. I think this might be my favorite. I mean, I wouldn't mind a bottle of the Assam because I would love to know what that smells like, non-cut, without the 50%.
I can send you a straight sample, although I'm out of samples right now, so I have to wait till I complete the new batch.
The only thing about silver that might put somebody who is not, let's say, addicted to fragrance like we are off is the everlasting flower, that immortelle note. For a small amount of time, I found before that amber really like jumps forward, can give off this slight curry vibe. And if they just spray it and smell it, they might go, oh, no, it's not for me. But if you have to let this dry down, the ambery dry down is absolutely amazing. I don't think I've smelled an amber fragrance that dries down quite like silver.
Thank you. Yeah, I find overspraying it when you wear it really, you get this amazing dry down. Like I went to my girlfriend's choir concert and just, sprayed twice as much as I normally would. And, afterwards people were like, oh my God, you smell great. Usually I don't wear enough for people to be really noticing.
Dre Fudan asks, is about to buy your sample set, but it would take about 2 to 3 months before you can even get to sniff them due to forwarding issues. Should he buy it now or wait a bit, is his question.
Buy now. No.
Buy now, that's right. Buy. You never know. Hey, you never know if they'll be available.
The only one that's not available right now is Assam. So, it depends on whether you want Assam or not. If it's going to be a while to hey GJ, if it's going to be a while for you to be able to get to them, then might as well wait. I don't think anything is going to become, knock on wood, I don't think anything is going to become unavailable at that time.
Have you thought about doing a set where they get all your fragrances?
I have. Yeah, I need to add some more options on things and more products.
So if you guys don't know, if you go to his website, clandestinelaboratories.com, if you do the sample set, you actually get to pick. So you get to pick the ones that you want to try.
Which creates a lot of work for me.
I could see that. Yes, that's right. Because you're having to kind of hand do each one. If you had them in a set like this where they just got them all, you could just kind of pump them out, I guess, eh?
Yeah. I should do a set that's everything, but I keep kind of adding and subtracting, and I guess kind of like Assam's out right now. So what do I, how do I sell people a complete set? Maybe down the line when I get more of a reliable inventory.
JJ says hi. Did you get to try Master Ram? Yes, we did. That was actually the very first one I tried on the live stream here. Let me spray it again, and we'll talk about it since you brought it up. Let's see if I can find it. Where is Master? Here it is. All right, let me spray this while I'm fumbling around for everything. Why don't you tell them a little bit about Master so they can hear it from the master's mouth?
Well, let me try to figure out which year I composed it in. Where did I put my papers? Oh, here we go. I think it was 2013, possibly 2014 when I first.
Okay.
Yep, October 2013. And boy, what should I talk about it? Well, actually, here's the thing. It's an unusual leather fragrance because it combines lychee fruit with leather. So it starts out with a really, to me, very fruity top note. Some people don't really get that. Like, some people say it's like hardcore leather, but I think it's actually very soft. It's got a powdery quality throughout, but the lychee fruit in particular, something about the texture of it seems to really go well with leather, and I think it's kind of an unusual or possibly unique innovation in that respect.
I don't see very many fragrances using this note. I mean, I can name a couple off the top of my head, like Zonka uses it. I think The Moon by Frederick Malle may have lychee in there, but that one I think is more mixed with oud. There is a leathery aspect to it too, but this is more, I mean, you get the leather straight away. Like it's like a spicy leather. And then I think, 30 seconds in, you get that fruity lychee note that kind of comes forward.
Yeah. And to me, it has an interesting texture to it. Like it does have a little bit of like a synthetic texture that I actually like in this context. I don't know if other people would say it's synthetic, but it's just and I'm not sure how many people think in terms of odor texture, but I feel like that's something that's actually neglected a lot in talking about perfumery, and especially in composing fragrance, is that just you could have a rose that's done in several different textures, rough and dry or smooth, and those textures really play a huge role in how people perceive fragrance, I think.
Yes, absolutely, 100% agree. And this fragrance, when I wore it on skin, one thing that immediately jumped out to me is how wearable it is. I mean, I looked at the note listing and I was like, oh, this one's going to be the one. And then I kind of had it on and it's like, it just kind of, you could wear this without like offending people. It's very wearable.
Yeah, I think most of mine are, not going to offend people. Even like, some of mine, I think you could probably get away with wearing in, hospitals where there's signs saying,
yeah.
Especially like Vert, which is very naturalistic.
Anything that smells like Bengay, famous YouTuber asks.
Yes, Vert, actually. I just mentioned it. That's funny. One time I was not the current version of Vert. I've actually toned down the Bengay a little bit and emphasized the yuzu a bit more and a little bit more richness of the vetiver. But I used to wear earlier versions a lot. And one time my coworker was like, "Are you wearing Bengay?"
Allie says she'd be up to do a sample set of everything from you, Mark, if you just included it all. There you go.
All right. Well, I mean, if the thing is, if people order, I think you could order 2 and get almost everything.
And get everything.
There's probably some, 2 is probably enough for most. And I usually, if people order 2 sets, I'll throw in, extras usually.
There you go. That would be cool. That would be a good little deal. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, my sets are a pretty good deal. They're bigger samples, better quality sprayers than most. But they're also
said that. Bravo for that, by the way. I hate those samples that.
When I was first starting out, I had those other ones, and they were just such crap, and they were so annoying to try to put together too. And these are much better, even though they're screw off. But the great thing about the screw off is you can unscrew it and use the stem as a swab, so you don't have to spray it. You can just try a little bit on your skin if you want. What was I? Oh, but I think they're a good deal because they take a lot of labor for me to put together. I track everything that people have ordered in the past, so I'm not sending them duplicates. When they order a bottle, I'll include a few extras of things they haven't smelled before. But like the packaging is very labor intensive and kind of cheeky. You showed the packaging when you're opening it on your live stream before.
Yes. Unboxing.
So there's definitely easier ways for me to do it, but
Alan says he agrees. He agrees on the purchase of the complete sample set. So you got some fans with that idea.
All right, I'll add it. But like I was saying, how do I do that when I'm out of like what happens when I'm out of Assam and someone orders that? It's like I have to remove that option, or I'm not sure.
Audrey says, I was curious how much the vanilla comes through in master. Big fan of unique leathers, but my allergies aren't a huge fan of most vanilla accords.
There's vanilla in there, and it's kind of a subtle powderiness as opposed to like a heavy, some vanillas can be very gloppy, for lack of a better word, very heavy, thick, sweet. Sticky. It's
not
like
your vanilla Rama or anything like that, Audrey. Don't worry.
Yeah, I've like I mentioned earlier, I've had 3 people buy their first bottles of fragrance from me because they're fragrance sensitive and can't normally wear stuff. One of them is a friend of mine from college, and I gave her I met her for lunch with my girlfriend and gave her 3 samples, and she didn't want to try them because she's so fragrance sensitive, and so she didn't want to get a headache there. So she tried them later at home, and they all worked for her. And so she then ordered 2 sample sets to get everything, and tried everything, and had no problem with any of them. Which I think is probably a reflection of the way that I compose. I don't tend to like overdose, aroma chemicals or incredibly sweet, heavy things that tend to, really trigger people. So I can't speak to Audrey's experience, but
yeah, even Novochoc, which is the chocolate one, Audrey, is not sweet. So there's very little here that's sweet. You're not going to get like the modern sweet vanilla that you're probably thinking of. No, I mean it is kind of more powdery, subtle sweetness, I would say.
Yeah, I will say though, it depends whether you have allergies or sensitivity, because they're completely different things. An allergy is a physical mechanism that will, it's response to specific chemicals, and I can't tell you, without knowing what specifically you're allergic to. But it sounds like you might have a sensitivity that, probably won't be a problem.
Yep. Dre Fudan asks, can you describe the scents that aren't on the site yet, but are on the discovery sets, like Race RX and Two Boros?
I think there's actually a page on the limited releases for Tuberos. I don't think I put Racer X on, which Racer X is a lemon mimosa incense fragrance that's the lemon note's very long lasting. It's pleasant to wear in the summer. It's trying to remember the other notes. I'm having a hard time remembering notes, actually, because they're not necessarily the exact ingredients that are in things. And I have 15 fragrances.
Yes.
Anyway, Racer X is let's just say it's a pleasant lemon mimosa that people say the lemon note's very, very soft, but it's also very performant. Tuberos is someone who has been a big fan of my stuff from the start, and who really loves silver. Smelled Tuberos recently and just was like, if I didn't know this was yours, I wouldn't believe it, because it's just, he thought it was god awful, and it's done in a fairly artificial and fairly sweet style, but it does contain a lot of actual natural tuberose. It's just integrated into a fragrance, which is, I describe it, I think, as pretty and sweet, and it's more in a commercial vein than most of my stuff, I'd say.
Interesting. Appreciate that. Rachel says, I bet you could put a note on the complete sample set saying it includes only the fragrances currently in stock or something.
But then you get shorted 1 or 2. Or
yeah, that's a good point.
I hate disappointing people.
Yes,
I think I mentioned in a comment on your live stream before that someone was asking about the fact that I'm offering samples of the unreleased ones, and that was unusual and why or something. And I said, well, it's because it gives me anxiety when people blind buy, because they're the only people who are disappointed. If you've already smelled it, you're going to like it. So I really try to make it short of offering individual samples, which is just too much work for me. But American Perfumery will. I try to make, I really try to encourage people to, buy the discovery sets. I try to keep them affordable and fun, and I think it's a good way to try a range of fragrances too, because if you buy one thing, who knows if you're not going to like something else better.
Yeah. Absolutely, 100% agree. Sample first, don't blind buy. Do as I say, not as I do. So what about Ashes? Ashes, we were actually talking backstage, and this is the one I have not talked about on the channel yet. I don't have a video on. It's the only one from the set that Mark sent me that I haven't actually given my thoughts on yet. And when we were talking backstage, we were talking a little bit about New York, and I was telling him I have family in upstate New York, and there's something in this that reminds me of kind of my grandmother's house she lived in for 50 years, in upstate New York I just have images of like big trees and flowers, and tell us a little bit about ashes. It's not like what it says on the tin, what you would expect anyways.
Yeah, that's been a divisive fragrance, actually. Some people, there's a negative review on Base Notes by someone who blind bought a bottle and then emailed me they didn't like it, and then, or no, then he left a review on my website, I think, comparing it to fragrance he used to sell at Sephora in 2007 by Demeter called Thunderstorm, which I've never smelled. And saying it was dated and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, I wrote him back and offered him his money back, and he wrote back and was like, I didn't say I want my money back. And he got all triggered, and then was like, I know it's impossible to make a great fragrance these days because of IFRA restrictions and lack of good natural materials, which I'm just scratching my head over. But keep trying. Anyway, my gripes aside, some people really smell the earth note in it and don't seem to fixate on that, especially if they recognize it from from this other fragrance. Pretty good. But it's a unisex gardenia fragrance, which is kind of an unusual thing, I think. It's got very earthy qualities. Gardenia is an earthy flower. The theme is death and rebirth. Gardenia is a funeral flower. And it took me 2.5 years of just struggling to get, this was actually the first time I had an abstract concept that I really, decided, okay, I'm going to, do this concept. And it was really specific for me because when I was a young chemistry nerd as a kid, I used to filter clean fireplace ash to get potassium hydroxide. And when you add the water to the ash, you get this incredibly dry, earthy, mineralic, kind of petrichor smell that, was a memory for me. And so I wanted to make, something like that, but that would be wearable, which was really, it seemed impossible at first. Like every time I got the smell right, it was just like, oh, that doesn't perform. It, up close it smells terrible. It's just, who would want to wear this? And then, and I was actually originally using Blue Lotus as the floral heart of it, which, oh God, I had so many horrible attempts at it. And my girlfriend and I started joking because I'd text her late at night and say, I think I finally finished Ashes. And I'd wake up in the morning and smell it. No, or she'd smell it. Floor cleaner. So yeah, I had a breakthrough after 2 years of just failure. I completed a gardenia base, and gardenia is really hard to do well, I think, and not have it be artificial. There's an obvious perfumery material named Gardinol, or I can't remember the chemical name right now. My memory is terrible. That's just, it would be what most people would reach for to make gardenia, and actually is in gardenia naturally. But I managed to make a base that didn't contain any of it, but that was partly based on JCMS data, Headspace. And when I finished it, I just had this realization, oh, well, gardenia is a funeral flower. Maybe that should be the heart of Ashes. And using that base, I finished it in 2 attempts, I think. After that, it just all fell together and
just clicked.
Yep. Sometimes
I like this.
Thank you. I'm surprised that I would have assumed it wasn't your style.
It's not, but I like it.
Awesome.
I don't think I would wear it, but I like it. But that earthiness, it's something that kind of had to grow on me too, because there was a fragrance that I actually smelled. One of my favorite brands is MY, and they have a fragrance that is actually based around the earthy material called Figment. It's like civet in earthiness, and it's Anik Minardo, who's like a rock star, right? In the perfume world. And the first time I smelled this, I was like, nope, 100% not for me, never again. This was in 2017 when it came out. As soon as it came out, I got a sample. And then now last year, I actually ended up buying a bottle And I'm like, what was I thinking? I absolutely love this earthy smell. But you know what I mean? It was like, it had to grow on me. It was something I hated at first. And so that made, when people come up to me and talk about selling fragrances or, you know, finding stuff they don't like, I just tell them to put it away. Like, put it away for 3 months or 6 months and come back to it. You'd be surprised how the nose changes, you know?
Yeah, sometimes things are just so unfamiliar that they're just, you know, they're shocking, or you can only fixate on the thing that's not familiar, and, you know, you don't see the other parts. One thing I really like about ashes actually is the dry down. The earthy quality fades quite a bit, and you get this like really transparent, like floral musk that's very clean and, you know, very kind of peaceful. I like wearing it.
JJ saying there's an echo. You don't have another YouTube open, do you?
Let's see. No, oh, I do. I have your channel.
All right, I bet it'll go away now. Give it a second.
Hopefully it's better.
Thanks for that, JJ.
Yeah,
I'm gonna. Let's see. I'm still hearing it.
Oh.
Well, we made it 2 hours and 10 minutes in, though, so worst case, we'll power through. We only have a couple left, and I'll shut up. Let's see. So we were down to Certo. Tell us about Certo.
Oh, let's see. You know what? I think it's because I tilted my screen back, and it's actually the camera's behind. Is that better?
I can still hear an echo, but maybe let me disconnect my let me disconnect my microphone and reconnect it.
Turn my volume down on my computer too. Is it echoing on me or on you or on both?
All right. How about now? Yeah, there's still an echo. That's an echo.
Oh.
Well, I don't know how we made it 2 hours and 15 minutes in, and then it started up. But
yeah,
I'll try to shut up and let you talk about the final couple, and then we'll call it. This has been a great stream. I appreciate you joining me.
Yeah, it's been great talking. I'll try to hopefully have something interesting to say about them.
So I think Certo was one of the last ones. Certo, and we also had Belem.
So yeah, Certo is a bizarre, you know, I'm trying to say, the composing Certo is an example of my weird, you know, style that's based on me being self-taught and not professional. Let's see, I made an initial attempt and then split that in half and then worked on that half and then split that in half. And I think I split it 4 or 5 times before it, you know, ended up being the original, being the final version. And so it, you know, every step of the way, I, you know, really, you know, radically kind of obliterated things. And, you know, the original just became kind of a, you know, a base within the final. Styrel acetate. Yeah. Yeah, I find it useful for other stuff, just not gardenia. It's a really nice tangy green note. Let's see, what else about Certo? Certo actually still has the original green pepper in it because I made the base that was the first version. I used all of what I had left to make a large batch of that, so I'm still using that. Yeah, it's got, you know, strange combination of like, you know, pepperiness, leather, florals, and kind of a vanilla caramel dry down as well. Also try. I originally thought it was just a masculine fragrance, and I've been really surprised that I think on Fragrantica, the consensus is that it leans feminine, which I've also had quite a few women really click with it. Yeah, it's always surprising what people, As I was saying, it's nice to have an audience of people who know more than I do about fragrance to explain my work to me. It really helps me understand it myself and how people.
I thought traditional masculine the first time I smelled this.
Yeah, I mean, people have told me it's like stereotypical Italian men's fragrance.
Yes.
They're tired of fragrances done that style, and I don't know. my girlfriend and I came up with the name because I was looking for something that meant sure, and she would study Italian. Now I'm hearing an echo of me with a delay.
How about now? Yeah, I can still hear the echo. All right.
Now I don't hear the echo. What do you do?
Yeah, it's yeah. I don't know how. I just don't understand how we made it so long and then it popped up. JJ brought the echo.
Yeah, possibly.
Well, we only got one left.
Oh, it's only on here.
Let's spray this bad boy.
All right.
Tell us a little bit about Belem.
Oh, I'm sorry. Belem is it's based on, like the website says, it's when my girlfriend and I visited Belem in Portugal. It's a historic coastal city in Portugal, and it's basically kind of based around the smells of that the place. There's a marina there. There's sea air, and we were eating pastéis de Belem, which are like these pastries with custard, and they're kind of like cooked almost to be like a creme brulee, except for not like crispy like that. They have kind of smoky vanilla. Oh, they're delicious. And then on the way back, we were sitting on a bench across from this hedge, which I started rubbing and smelling because I do that with plants a lot. And I think it was bay, but it had this really amazing like green quality at first with like a warm, spicy background, probably bay. I just thought like all that would make a nice, quote unquote aquatic fragrance that's not really aquatic.
Yes. I think this would be a good starter for somebody if they wanted to kind of begin with your brand.
It's good, and as you observed, it's good with hot weather.
Yes, a good hot weather fragrance. It reminded me a little bit of stuff like green water or these real neroli. There's no neroli in this.
No, it's actually the only fragrance of mine that's has dihydromercenol in it.
Interesting.
And it's actually based around an accord that I discovered between. I don't know if it's necessarily an accord, but they work really well together. Guaiac wood, which tends to have kind of a bacony top note, as you were saying, barbecue, people say. And it gets, it gets kind of prettier, more like a perfume material as it dries down. But the top note has this like slightly challenging, bacon. But dihydromercenol is really great at masking odors, and so the combination of the two, it just clicks. So that's kind of the heart of it, is that combo. And then there's a lot of ancillary stuff on the top, including some kind of tropical materials that give the citrus kind of a punch. And there's also quite a bit of a woody amber material in there that's blended really well. But if I've heard from people who are sensitive to that particular one, that it just jumps out and they can't do it.
I didn't notice a woody amber material in this though. So
yeah, I was gonna say I possibly shouldn't even mention it because most people, if you're not thinking about it, it's not there. It's just once if you focus on it, it's definitely there.
Yeah. Rachel says, "What's tropical materials?" What?
It's an aroma chemical, a very powerful one, oxane. I think it's a natural component in passion fruit, actually. but it just kind of juices things a bit and gives them a tropical punch.
I can see that. Yeah, I feel like I shouldn't talk anymore with nothing but the echo going on. So,
and I'm self-conscious about talking. So
no, I am right. But heck, it's been a great 2.5 hours almost. So I guess we should probably say thanks very much for joining. It's been a pleasure talking about the brand and getting to know you. And I hope some of our audience gets to try your fragrances for the first time. I mean, I've only tried them for the first time in the last week or two, couple weeks. So, and then of course Rachel sent me Film Noir, but getting to know your whole line has been a pleasure. So I really do appreciate you coming on, and thanks to the chat and everyone who joined. And sorry for the echo at the end, but I think we got through about 2 hours with no echo. So.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for having me. It's been coming after Liz Morris. It's really an honor. And what was I going to say? Thank you for your audience for tuning in and paying attention. I hope people will try stuff, and I look forward to growing and getting to know more people.
AD80 says the echo only occurs after the channel reaches a certain amount of truths. There you go. We're there. It's good stuff. But honestly, it's been a pleasure. Thanks a lot for coming on. I've enjoyed it immensely, Mark. Very much appreciated, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Ramsey.
All right.
Good night.
Good night, everyone. Bye, chat. See ya.